Hello everyone, it's Scott, and today I'm back with my top 10 new rares from Magic the Gathering Foundations. We've got over 500 cards in the set. We got a little over 130 new cards in Foundations, and then the rest are reprints. And these are the 10 new rares that I think are going to have the most impact on Standard. But before we dive in, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Foundation, spoiler season, and beyond. So at number 10, I have two lords. So first is Erebos the First Fang for 2 and a white mana. You get a legendary creature, that's a cat avatar, and is a 2/2. Other cats you control get +1/+1. And whenever Erebos, another non-token cat you control, enters the battlefield, you get to create a 1/1 white cat creature token. So immediately when Erebos comes into play, you're going to have 4 power on the field because you're going to have Erebos 2/2 power and toughness, and then you're going to have the token that it creates when it comes into play also be a 2/2. So very good card and a very good enabler of our cat decks. In addition to that, we got Dropkick Bomber for 2 and a red mana. You get a Goblin Warrior, that's a 2/3, and other goblins you control get +1/+1. And for a red mana, until end of turn, another target goblin you control gains flying, and when this creature deals combat damage, sacrifice it. So this is a really nice ability on Dropkick Bomber where you can fly over a creature to deal hopefully lethal combat damage if the board state gets bogged down. So I like that ability on it. And you can do this multiple times. So if you have 4 or 5 mana lying around, you can give your whole team flying and let them fly over your opponent's defenses and hopefully win the game there. So I think these are going to be tribal cards that we're going to see a lot of over the next 5 years. Next, we've got at number 9, Banner of Kinship for 5 mana. You get an artifact, and as this artifact enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. This artifact enters with a fellowship counter on it for each creature you control of the chosen type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each fellowship counter on this artifact. So I can easily see this in the mid to late game coming into play, and you've got 4 or 5 creatures that are in a tribal deck like lizards or cats or goblins, and now you're giving each of them +4/+4, +5/+5, and I think that's good enough to play in Standard, because typically what will happen at that point is your creatures are going to be large enough that in combat they're going to take out whatever your opponent has, and if 1 or 2 of them just gets through, that probably is going to be pretty close to the damage you need to end the game and win it. So I think even though this is 5 mana, I think it's going to see Standard play. At number 8, I have Spinner of Souls for 2 and a green mana. You get a Spider Spirit, that's a 4/3 with reach. And whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And the nice thing about Spinner of Souls is it's not limited to once a turn, so anytime a non-token creature you control dies, so you can have basically, you can attack and know that as long as Spinner of Souls is on the field, then you're going to be able to get a card replacement in your hand for anything that dies on the field that's a non-token creature. And I think that's a pretty powerful ability in Standard as we look at the current state of Standard today. Next, at number 7, I've got Knight Squire for 1 and a white mana. You get a Cat Scout, that's a 1/1. And whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And as long as this creature has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it has flying and is a knight in addition to its other types. So this is a card that we see copies of or similar cards to regularly in Standard. And I really like this one because obviously it works with our Cat Tribe deck, but every time you put a creature into play, it's going to gain a +1/+1 counter. But then the thing that I really like about this is after you hit that third one, then it gets flying and is a knight in addition to that. I think those abilities are relevant in Standard, and certainly in a cat deck, having flyers is going to be important to that deck winning games. Next, at number 6, I have Alicia, who laughs at fate. For 1, a black and a red mana, you get a legendary creature that's a human warrior and is a 2/2 with first strike. And whenever Alicia attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And at the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, return target creature card with mana value less than or equal to Alicia's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So the thing that I really like about this card is it's going to grow over time, obviously, if you're attacking with it. But more importantly, you play this in a deck that's got a lot of small creatures in it. And even when those small creatures die, because of the raid ability, you're going to be able to bring one of those back every turn. And I think that's good enough to see play in Standard. All right, at number 5, we have Sear Slicer Goblin. For 1 and a red mana, you get a Goblin Warrior. That's a 2/1 with raid, and at the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. And goblin decks are going to always want to be constantly attacking. We've already talked about the newest goblin lore we have, so we're likely to have 2/2 and or better goblins that are going to be attacking, and some of them are going to be able to get through for damage. And as long as you've attacked, you're going to get to create a replacement for at least one goblin that died on a given turn, and I think that's good enough to see Standard play. Next, we've got Tiny Bones Bobble Burglar coming in at number 4. For 1 and a black mana, you get a legendary creature that's a skeleton rogue and is a 1/3, and whenever an opponent discards a card, exile it from their graveyard with a stash counter on it. During your turn, you may play cards you don't own with stash counters on them from exile, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. And for 3 and a black mana, you can tap Tiny Bones, and each opponent discards a card, activate only as a sorcery. So we've already got a good discard deck in Standard right now, so I think this easily is going to fit into that style of deck. And even in a legendary creature deck, I think this has some relevance as well, because we know we've got Tiny Bones joins up as a way to force your opponent to either, when it comes into play, to discard a card or mill cards. So I think there's, a nice synergy here with both of the Tiny Bone cards that we saw from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. And because of that, I think this is going to see some Standard play. Coming in at number 3, we have Abysmal Harvester. For 1 and 2 black mana, you get a Demon Warlock. That's a 3/2. And you can tap it and exile target creature card from a graveyard that was put there this turn. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a nightmare in addition to its other types. Then exile all other nightmare tokens you control. So this is a very interesting card. So first of all, it's going to see play because it's going to be an enabler in our Unholy Annex decks. So we know that Unholy Annex, when you have a demon in play, it deals 2 damage to your opponent, you draw a card, you gain 2 life. So this is just another good card for that deck to help make sure that when you have an Unholy Annex's room open, that you're going to be able to go ahead and draw the card, gain the life, and drain your opponent. And because of that, I think this is going to see a lot of Standard play while Unholy Annex is in Standard. All right, and number 2, we have Kiora, the Rising Tide. For 2 and a blue mana, you get a legendary creature that's a Merfolk Noble and is a 3/2. And when Kiora enters the battlefield, you get to draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. So you get to rummage for cards when she comes into play. So nice ability on Kiora. But more importantly, she has Threshold. Whenever Kiora attacks, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may create Scion of the Deep, a legendary 8/8 blue octopus creature token. So anytime you have 7 cards in your graveyard, which in a Graveyards Matter strategy, which Kiora is helping because you're going to discard 2 cards. I think this is going to be a very, very powerful card. And even if your opponent kills the Scion of the Deep because it's legendary, the next time you attack with Kiora, you get it back. And I think that's going to be good enough for this card to see significant standard play. At number 1, I've got Scrawling Crawler for 3 mana. You get an artifact creature. That's a Phyrexian construct. It's a 3/2. And at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player loses 2 life. So with Scrawling Crawler on the battlefield, your opponent is going to lose 2 life every single turn. And we already have Razorkin Needlekin. And that card does the exact same thing. When an opponent draws a card, they lose a life. Well, those 2 cards together, you play Needlekin on turn 2, you play this on turn 3, and now your opponent, when they draw their first card, each turn, they're going to lose a couple of life, and then on your turn, they're going to lose additional life. And just by attacking a little bit, I think that we do have a Rakdos deck that's going to really become a chip damage deck, because we've got so many cards in black and red now that just by playing the game, they do damage to your opponent. And because of that, I think that's going to be a pretty powerful deck in Standard. All right, so those are my top 10 new rares from Foundations. I'll be back with more videos from the previews from Foundations. I'm going to do top 10 lists for all of the new cards, but also all of the reprints as well. So I've got a uncommons list coming for our new card, and I've got a common, uncommon, rare, and mythic rare reprint list as well. And our focus again is on the cards that I think are going to be most relevant to Standard. So thanks for staying to the end of the video. Remember, like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Foundation season and beyond, and leave a comment about what you thought was your favorite new rare from Foundations. Thanks. I'll see you in the next one.